Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be talking about Concord again, and this time it's slightly different, but we'll get into that when we get into the article. We are on PC Gamer today, and we're another article by Andy Chalk. We've had a couple articles by him by now. It'll be linked down in the description if you'd like to read along. The title goes, Sony's failed shooter Concord has been updated dozens of times on Steam in October, and I'm starting to feel a comeback. There's a whole lot of activity going for a game that's supposedly dead. And I have seen some of these updates in the Steam data mining data. For the most part, it looks like some of it is just like they're being batched into Sony's PC games. So things like Helldivers is also being updated, God of War, and the other Horizon Zero Dawn. So there is things of where Concord is just in the batch of that, but there is still a lot of stuff being updated that isn't connected to that. Concord was decidedly not great, so not great that Sony took the virtually unprecedented step of pulling the plug on the whole thing just a couple weeks after it launched. Sony said that it was time that at the time that it wanted to explore options to better reach our players, leaving open the possibility that some sort of comeback, maybe as a free-to-play game, might be in the cards. I was dubious, to put it gently, but recent events have me thinking that maybe it's actually going to happen. I think it's 100% going to happen because Sony has put too much money into it to say that it is. At this point, I think they're too deep. They're just too deep, and they kind of need to try again. And a free-to-play launch would be the best choice, I would think. I hope this is not going to be a soon thing, though. I think they need at least 6 months. At least. Because they also need to do some fundamental changes to the gameplay. They need to speed everyone up, and they need at least a payload map if they want to be a hero shooter that is anything worth its salt right now. The team deathmatch, all that type of stuff, that's good for casual modes, but you need a game mode that is better than what they had. Concord was taken offline on September 6th, but a large number of updates have been applied to the game on Steam over the past 2 weeks, visible on SteamDB. The updates began on September 30th and continue with reasonable regularity at a pace of half a dozen or so per day until October 10th. They're pretty much incomprehensible to non-programmers such as myself. Same, I have looked at it and it is very confusing, but I have read other people's opinions on it. With the presence of words like playtest, PM test, and Sony QA, specifically a reference to Sony quality assurance engineer, certainly seems to suggest that something was cooking. And I do hope they are cooking because this game, I don't know if it deserves, but it needs another chance to ever happen, and hopefully they figure it out. The updates stop until today, October 16th, making a change to legal lines and adding a health warning if you have history of epilepsy or seizures. Consulting a doctor before use. Certain patterns may trigger seizures with no prior history. Before using, and for more details, see important healthy safety warnings. That, I'm pretty sure, is just a batch. The Concord just got batched in with a ton of Sony products. So this is the trigger warning one. This stuff is not, though, if I remember correctly. Yes, this stuff isn't, but this is the Sony Quest. So everyone's pretty sure this is Sony quality of assurance. This is PM test, which that could be so many things. That's the problem. And they're testing something, obviously, and then more Sony quality assurance stuff. So they're doing something in the background. A virtually identical update was made at the same time to other Sony games, including Helldivers 2, God of War, and God of War Ragnarok. It's possible that Concord simply got caught in the blanket update of the Sony game on Steam, but that doesn't explain all the previous updates, which collectively represent quite a lot of effort for a game that's effectively dead, unless, as the man once said, the report of the death was exaggerated. It was not exaggerated. The death was swift, and it was basically a dead game on arrival, especially coming from a AAA developer. The main problem is that if this was a game without a huge budget behind it and not Sony behind it, honestly, the game would have been kind of fine. Like a couple thousand people playing it on launch and like a couple hundred playing after that. If this was a small game, then that would be fine because you're in a very crowded market of hero shooter FPS games, specifically PvP. But this was a game that Sony was behind. And the fact that had those numbers with that marketing behind it and the amount of money they spent on it, that was the biggest problem. Because if this was an indie game, it'd still be going on right now, I'm sure of it. And honestly, it'd probably be better if it was an indie game, because then there'd be less expectations. Sony didn't respond to an inquiry they sent last week about what these updates mean, which for now leaves us hanging, but I have to wonder why Sony would be horsing around like this if they don't have plans for something. A free-to-play relaunch seems entirely reasonable. Concord is literally a complete finished and released game that cost a presumably not insurmountable amount of money to make. Sony bought the entire development studio in 2023, after all, and while people may have balked at its $40 price tag, curiosity might be enough to draw players in if Sony is literally just giving it away. I agree. I think a free-to-play launch is most likely the thing, though I don't know if I agree that Concord is a complete and finished game, because I did feel like one of the problems was Concord felt like an early access game being sold for $40. From the gameplay I saw and watched, the game looked like it was close to being finished. You know what I mean? Because it had some maps, it had the characters, but the game, I think the problem is that the gameplay loop didn't match the game modes of the game. Like, the characters don't match the game modes. Like, you're playing TDM and like you're playing team deathmatch, control point, and domination, but you're using kits that are from hero shooters. So there's no real objective, there's no teamwork, it's just kind of running around and gunning down everyone. And then the ranked mode was Counter-Strike, but worse in every way. So it was just weird. It was I think the problem is that the gameplay was fine, but like, I don't think it was finished. It needed at least 6 more months, or maybe even a year, because there needed to be more people playing it, because I don't know. We do know that there was like a toxic positivity culture in the game studio, because I don't think any reasonable game dev or player could play that and say that that is a finished product and willing and able to fight against the big players, because it just wasn't enough. And like, some of the stuff wasn't also explained. There's I don't know how many times where I've watched Concord videos and I've heard people complain about the ranked mode, whereas when you play a hero and you win the round, you can't play that hero again. And they say then you can never play the hero again. But the difference is that you can't technically play the hero again, but you just have to equip the hero with different passives, so you have the same hero but slightly different in your roster. But the game never tells you that. The game doesn't explain to you that you can have multiple of the same person as a hero, so you can play the same person over and over again in the ranked mode. But it's also just like weird that exists, and like doesn't make sense inherently, and it's just weird and not very intuitive. And the fact that every time I watch someone talk about the game, about that ranked mode and how bad it was, they never mention it, or at least the ones I've watched. No one has mentioned that mechanic. So like, either they either ignored it, didn't know it existed, or it was like a combination of all three. So it's really a fault on the game itself and the game developers not explaining themselves. And it just meant that it didn't work. If that is the biggest problem, it just doesn't work, and you need to go back to the drawing board. And I have to probably chalk that up to the toxic positivity, because there's no way any QA team would play that mode and say that's good, because the point of the hero shooter is because people love the characters. And if you have a mode where the fundamental difference is that when you win a round, you can't use the same character unless you have this very weird loadout system, which by default is all the individual characters. So by default, if you don't go into customized stuff, you can't play the same hero again. So by default, you can only play a hero once, which is very counterintuitive if people like one hero. So it's just weird. It's just weird and not very well thought through, I think. Of course, even if Concord comes back, there's no guarantee of success. Yeah, of course. Fireworks Studio would still have a job of turning it into a good shooter. Even free mediocrity isn't good, and to keep people coming back for long and reworking Concord so that players actually like it would be a major tax into itself. And there's no guarantee you'll even get that far. All of these updates could just be a bit of automated housekeeping, that sort of thing that goes unseen on the background on Steam every day. It is true, Concord does have like a magnifying glass on it, so people are paying a little bit more attention. But I do feel like they're gonna try again, and I do think they need more time. Like, I hope it's not coming out this year, next year at the earliest, and I kind of hope it's late next year, like summer, or like honestly fall or winter next year. Have people forget that Concord exists, honestly, because Concord, as people remember it, is bad. Let people forget about it, then next year relaunch what you've been working on. I think that's the best possible choice for Concord to be a success. And even in my most optimistic thought process on this, I still don't think it's going to be the multi-billion-dollar franchise that's the Sony execs and the Fireworks Studio execs thought this was going to be. But I do think it can exist and be a competitor to other games. I just don't think it's going to be that big because it's just not good enough. And it's not that it's not good enough, it's that it's just people are sick of this. And that's one of the big problems is that this game took too long to make, it seems, because by the time when this game was conceived as an idea in like 2016, 2017, this was a good idea. The problem is it took too long to make. So now people are sick of these types of games. People have moved on, and that's a problem. So there's no multi-billion-dollar success here. A solid game that people will come back to and play and then stop playing and then come back when it updates in the seasonal thing of kind of like an Overwatch cycle or a Paladin cycle or even stuff like Valorant cycle and stuff like that, where people play, they get bored a little bit, they come back, but they come back when the update comes or when the new season drops or when a new character drops or a new map drops, all that type of stuff. I think Concord can survive as that type of game. As a big hitter that's selling tons of stuff and like making billions of dollars, no. But a game that is making money, yes, I think it can be a success in that sense. Not a multi-billion or even multi-hundreds of million. I think it can be a success in a small state, but I don't think it will be the crazy success that everyone thought it would be, or at least the executives thought, and that was being pushed. Let's finish off this article. But my feeling is that we haven't seen the last of Concord yet. What comes out the other end remains to be seen, but I'm pretty confident it will be seen sooner or later. The bottom line, quite bluntly, is there's not a hell of a lot to lose at this point. The money's spent and the work is done, so they might as well grab another handful and gun it at the wall to see if it sticks this time. I do agree. The money has already been spent. The engine has already been, the game's already built. The base of the game is built, so you need to try again. And I do hope that it's either they try again as a PvP hero shooter and they do what they want to do in terms of first of all, you need the payload map. You need payload maps and you need a more defined gameplay loop, because the problem is that the characters so far weren't good enough to people to latch onto. So you need to have something to get people to play. And if you're going to be banking on the world and the characters, well, then you need to be better at presenting that. Because unfortunately, the characters they don't look bad. It looked too marvelly, I think, for a lot of people. And it looked too much like it was trying to copy Guardian of the Galaxy, basically. And the problem is when it's a PvP game, those types of characters can't really work because there isn't enough story for something like that to exist in. You need a story if that's what you want to go with. So if you're building a co-op mode or a single player story mode, then that's great, But the problem is that takes a lot of time, and I don't know if you can do that within a year, which is what the timeline I was talking about earlier. So I don't know. It's a real hard problem, and as an outsider, not having to worry about the money and all that type of stuff, I don't even know what the correct answer is. I don't even know if the right answer is anything. So this is a wait and see. I will be back whenever Concord comes up again, and I will look into it. So thank you all for watching today's video. I appreciate everyone subscribing and all that, doing that YouTube stuff, comment, all of that stuff. If you'd like to follow me on other places, I have a Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a TikTok. Other than that, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Goodbye, everyone.